Shalom, everybody. Shalom. What up? What up? How y'all doing today? Hey, welcome back to the next episode of Reading with SHILO. What up? It's SHILO. I'm out here and ready to roll through these sea of pages here and get back into The Medical Apartheid by Miss Harriet A. Washington, where we're going to jump into chapter 7. We're going to start going syphilis-soaked race. That's what we're going to get into today. Today. The next time I open my eyes and we here again. So let's begin. 25. Let's get up, man. Work our body, work our mind, and work our body again. So get off your ass. Get up. Get up. If you have, open your eyes with everything that you need, your hearing, your sight, your speech, your movement, your thought, your feelings, or as long as you have breath to breathe, then you still have everything you need to succeed today. So let's get going and let's get to pumping with what we need to succeed and what we have to succeed. We're going to do 25 something. 25 something. You do 25 something. I'm going to do 25 something. I'm going to do 50 this morning, though. I'm going to do 50 on mine. Because I'm doing one on each arm. So get up. Let's get your 25 going. Let's get your 25 somethings going. I'm going to get my 25 something. So we can go ahead and get to reading, man. So one at a time. Let's get it. Hold on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My mirror. Let's see what I'm doing. 6. If you're coming in, do your 25 things and let's go. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Shalom, shalom. 13, 14. 10 on this side. 15, 16, 17. Oh, 18, 19. Come on in. 20. We ain't ready to start reading yet. We're going to read after you do your 25. I'm doing my 25. 21. 22. That's what I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4. Do your 25. Listen, come on. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Come on, sucker. 10. Get it up. 11. Come on, sucker. 21. I mean, not 21. Shit, 11. Then let's 12. Come on. 13. Push it, y'all. 14. Whatever you do, make sure you don't bullshit yourself. 15. Do what you can do. 16. Just bust a move. 18. And then we'll get to reading. 19. 20. 21. 22. 23. 24. One more. Get that bitch up. 25. All right. That's my 25 things. Whew. 25 things. Get your 25 things done, man. Oh, man. So we done did. Worked our body. Let's get our mind going. And let's get to reading. Let's get to reading about the medical apartheid from Miss Harriet A. Washington. Miss Harriet A. Washington. All right. Blood flowing, blood pumping. Let's get going. So we finished off chapter 6 yesterday. There was a lot going on in chapter 6. They were still pushing to try to make medical advancements using the so-called blacks, the poor, the underclass. They were battling between the colleges and the government to try to implement more laws where they could use actual slaves and blacks without issues. And now we are in chapter 7. Chapter 7, a notorious syphilis-soaked race, and what really happened at Tuskegee. And that's what we're going to get into today. Let's get it. The medical apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on Black Americans from colonial times to the present, by Mrs. Harriet A. Washington. Chapter 7, a notoriously syphilis-soaked race, and what really happened. The future of the Negro lies more in the research laboratory than in the schools. When diseased, he should be registered and forced to take treatment before he offers his diseased mind and body on the altar of academic and professional education. And that's Thomas Murrell, MD, U.S. Public Health Service of 1910. I believe they still feel this way. We now know, where we could only surmise before, that we have contributed to their ailments and shortened their lives. Oliver Clarence Winger, MD, U.S. Public Health Service in 1950. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service inaugurated its study of syphilis in the untreated Negro male, the Tuskegee Syphilis Study, and which promised free medical care to about 600 sick, desperately poor sharecroppers in Macon County, Alabama. The study was designed, the PHS explained, to study the progression of syphilis in Black men. And scientists had long claimed that the venereal disease manifested differently in Blacks than in whites. And the PHS scientists decided to document this by finding a pool of infected Black men, withholding treatment from them, and then charting the progression of symptoms and disorders. But the PHS lied to the subject, convincing them that they were being treated and not studied. And when the men died, the physician researchers determined to autopsy them in order to trace precisely the ravages of the disease in their bodies. And among other things, the PHS expected to validate itself or its belief in a specific racial dimorphism of syphilis, whereas the disease was thought to do its worst damage to the neurological system and brains of whites. It was thought to wreak its worst havoc on the cardiovascular system of Blacks, and sparing their relatively primitive and underdeveloped brains. The best intentions. The origin of the Tuskegee study was a benign one, and however, in 1894, when Booker T. Washington, founder of Tuskegee Institute, met wealthy philanthropist Julius Rosenwald, founder of Sears and Roebuck and Company, they were mutually impressed. The head of the Rosenwald Foundation, who had a history of initiating self-sustaining Black economic programs, had already generously supported beneficent research and self-sustaining industrial initiatives among Black Southerners. And he recognized in Tuskegee Institute a potential center of Black industry, and in Washington, the man who could realize this potential. Rosenwald also realized that Tuskegee's promise was surrounded by the grinding poverty, public health vacuum, poor health, and rampant infectious disease of Macon County, and that this dreary indigence would stifle its potential workforce and limit its industrial growth. And together, he and Washington planned a Tuskegee-based program to provide medical treatment for Macon County, and a system that began in earnest in the late 1920s. Now, by that time, slavery had ended in Macon County nearly 70 years earlier, but in name only. And except for the staff and students of Tuskegee Institute, later to be Tuskegee University, most of the country's 27,000 blacks lived in the same lives as had their enslaved forebears. And in 1932, 82% of its residents were black, and half of these lived far below the poverty line. Their median income was $1 a day, but like their enslaved forebears, they never saw a dollar from one year to the next. Trapped in the unsure cycle of tenant cotton farming, they were chained by debt and forced to work the same land as had their enslaved grandparents, and like Alabama slaves, they owned nothing, not even the crumbling shack they lived in. Sounds like the same shit today. It just sounds like it's packaged differently. We're still sharecropping today. You're not taught or pushed to have your own shit for real, for real. You still got to go work for somebody else, for the most part. These sharecroppers included children, were weighed down by 100-pound bags of cotton, living and working under the orders of white landowners who kept them in economic thraldom by paying low prices for their crops and charging inflated prices for food, seed, and other necessities. Those blacks who tried to flee the land were arrested, punished, and returned, or worse, just as their enslaved grandparents would have been, beatings, lynchings, and murders that were never investigated in forced black serfdom. The strictly segregated schools were poorly equipped and sparsely staffed, and in any event, few families could spare children from the fields long enough for them to learn to read and write well. And the only thing blacks had was a great deal of illness, but medical care did not exist for most of them. And 15 of the 16 doctors practicing in the country were white. And although the overworked black doctor would see patients for trade, a chicken, some greens, whatever the patient could spare, the rest wanted their fee in cash, plus $1 a mile. The 4 doctors of the John A. Andrew Veterans Hospital tried to care for the sick blacks who appeared at its doors, but they could help only a fraction of them, for their job was to care for the staff of students of Tuskegee Institute. Poor nutrition, a lack of decent housing, and rampant infectious diseases, from malaria to tuberculosis to syphilis, haunted the sharecroppers of Macon County. The 1929 syphilis survey of Black Alabama residents, commissioned by Dr. Taliaferro Clark, chief of the PHS Venereal Disease Division, determined a high rate of 36% in Macon County. And however, some other Alabama counties had higher rates, so this could not have been the chief impetus for the study. It is more likely that its presence of Tuskegee Institute and later a John A. Andrew Veterans Hospital made the site a scientifically attractive one. And the survey also suggested that although treatment could eradicate the disease, 99% of the cases in blacks had never been treated. Syphilis was indeed a serious threat to health and productivity. The disease was caused by a type of bacterial organism named Spirochaeta pallida. Spirochaeta pallida. I think I'm pronouncing it wrong. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. More specifically, Treponema pallidum. Spirochet and a spirochet are the names of their spiral shape, or get their names for their spiral shape. And under a microscope, the worm-like bacteria wiggle furiously. The T. pallidum can be acquired through sexual activity or My bad. Congenially. There we go. That's how I'm trying to pronounce it. Congenially. From an infected mother. Hmm. In the initial stage of sexual transmitted syphilis, a canker or hard, painless sore appears on the genitals and other point of entry, followed by flu-like symptoms. Hmm. If the disease, my bad. Where was I? There we go. If the disease is not treated, it enters a long, latent secondary stage before emerging to inflict an assortment of skin growths, running sores, gumma, bone decay, and heart damage. The final tertiary stage of syphilis may erupt several decades later, causing profound neurologic damage, like blindness, insanity, paralysis, and death. And because 30 years or more can intervene between the onset of syphilis and the dramatic mental symptoms of paralysis or tetria, tertiary syphilis, it was thought to be a separate mental disease until the mid 1940s, when antibiotics, particularly penicillin, was discovered to cure it, and it was belatedly recognized, belatedly, there we go. And it was belatedly recognized as the final stage of an infectious illness, syphilis. Rosenwald responded by earmarking money for syphilis treatment programs. And unfortunately, his wealth was consumed in the stock market crash of 1929. And with it vanished the support for Macon County's economic and disease treatment programs. Now, the U.S. Public Health Service stepped in, but the PHS physicians never shared Rosenwald's goal of Black self-sufficiency. The writings of his doctors revealed the lack of faith in African Americans' ability to manage their own economic and health issues. And PHS physician Thomas W. Merle, MD, expressed ambivalence about the possibility and even the advisability of eradicating syphilis from among Black Americans. So the scourge sweeps among them. Those that are treated are only half cured, and the effort to assimilate a complex civilization drives their diseased minds until the results are criminal records. Perhaps here, in conjunction with tuberculosis, will be the end of the Negro problem. Disease will accomplish what man cannot do. Yeah, he was ready to kill us off. He was waiting. That's what they wanted. Come on, tuberculosis. Ooh, kill them niggas. Oh, it didn't work. We out here. We don't die, we multiply. Oh, man. We out here, baby. PHS doctor portrayed Black Alabamians as resistant to health measures. Hey, roaches. We did everything. Oh, man. But they trying to do us dirty. It don't matter what they do. It don't matter what they do. Man, no matter what they do, we still out here. Oh, man. PHS doctors portrayed Black Americans as resistant to health measures, intellectually inferior, impetus, degenerate, and above all, at the mercy of frighteningly powerful sexual drives. Morality among these people is almost a joke and only assumed as a matter of convenience, sneered Muriel. And such medical speculation fostered an image of African Americans as sexually promiscuous and infected with syphilis, an impression that doctors reinforced with pity sayings. Virtue in the nigger race as like angels' visits, few and far between. And in the practice of 16 years in the South, I have never examined a virgin over 14 years of age, alleged Dr. Daniel D. Quillen of Athens, Georgia. Their point was that such sexual irresponsibility doomed blacks and chronic syphilitic infection. Shit, man. The slave masters was sleeping with them damn girls before they was 15. That's why he ain't damn well find no damn, or they was making them sleep with somebody else majority of the time. The PHS castigated blacks and as a notorious syphilis-soaked race, and Muriel predicted, after 50 years, we'll find an unsyphilitic Negro a freak, unless some such procedure as vaccination comes to the relief of the race, and that in the hands of the compelling law. And Dr. Frank Lydstrom theorized that black men were more likely than white men to spread venereal disease. The Negro's well-known sexual impetuosity may account for more abrasions and of the integument of the sexual organs. Boy, they getting into some words, man, right now. Integument. Abrasions of the integument of the sexual organs, and therefore more frequent infections than are found in the white race. With imagination rather than evidence as his guide, Dr. S.S. Hendon estimated the national prevalence of syphilis among blacks at 95%. But because clinical examinations did not support such widespread infection among blacks, Dr. Joseph Moore militated for Weizmann tests on all black men. Opening that a mere history of a penal sore only would not be adequate, and in as much as the average Negro has as many penal sores as a rabbit has off. Despite the PHS physician Cracker Barrel wisdom, family histories and clinical assessments revealed that 61% of the true syphilis cases in Macon County were not contracted through sexual activity, but were congenital, non-venereal syphilis. Medical researchers consistently ignored this fact in their publications and in their investigations. They persistently characterized syphilis in blacks as due to sexual profiligacy. However, not all the men who tested positive for syphilis via the Weizmann test really had the disease. The test was notoriously non-specific, and men who suffered from related illnesses such as yawns also tested positive. But yawns, a common non-venereal infectious disease epidemic to West Africa, is caused by a subspecies of the Treponema pallidum bacterium that causes syphilis. And in 1932, yawns was prevalent in the South, especially among blacks, not for racial reasons, but because it was abetted by conditions of poverty. And people who were malnourished and exposed to the elements went shoeless and were prone to frequent injuries that broke the skin, the sort that cotton pickers experience daily, were vulnerable to infections by pathogens that cause yawns. And unlike syphilis, yawns causes no long-term cardiovascular or neuronal, 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 damage. Macon County's high prevalence of syphilis, coupled with a nearly perfect treatment vacuum, suggested that to Teleophero Clark, not a need for treatment, but an opportunity for experimentation. And in 1932, the Tuskegee syphilis study officially began when he suggested that the PHS save the expense of treatment by merely observing the course of the disease in blacks and publishing the data. PHS doctors frequently defended their failure to offer therapy by insisting that blacks with syphilis would never voluntarily seek treatment. And however, this does not explain why they enticed study subjects by disguising the experiment as the treatment program promised to Rosenwald. And the PHS doctors knew that being cared for by the physician who professed himself devoted to restoring their health would be a godsend to the sick and forgotten blacks of Macon County. Accordingly to the PHS announced a day of free health assessments and screening tests that would be performed in Macon County. PHS nurse Eunice Rivers remembers that the clinic was overflooded with people coming in to get their blood drawn. And Oliver Clarence, O.C. Wenger, M.D., wrote, of course, the crowd milled around like so many sheep, and adding that 316 were given treatment before 2 p.m. Most had never seen a doctor before. And the physicians ran various tests while telling the men that they were being treated for the nebulous disorder and bad blood, which commonly referred to a wide array of symptoms from anemic blood to muscle aches and general malaise. Disorders such as parasitic infections and gonorrhea, syphilis, and other venereal diseases. Doctors dispense treatment in the form of vitamins, infectious doses of arsenic, and worse than useless mercury salve to those they suspected to have syphilis. Now, mercury had been used to treat syphilis for centuries, but as described in Chapter 1, it was infectious and caused devastating side effects such as injury to the nervous system and profound mental defects, hair and tooth loss, kidney and heart disease, and lung injury. And however, doctors withheld the state-of-art treatment for syphilis, which in 1932 consisted of arsenic compounds such as arsphenamide and neoarsphenamide, also known by their trade names as Salvarsan or 606. These were developed by German biochemist Paul Ehrlich in 1910 and were typically partnered with mercury ointments as adjuvant therapy. And after the first clinics enabled doctors to identify syphilactics, they selected study participants. They wanted only men whose signs and symptoms were on the exterior genitalia and therefore easier to identify than lesions hidden within the genitalia of women. They also wanted to exclude men whose syphilis was the result of a recent infection because doctors could be sure of choosing sick men if they chose those in the secondary or later stages of infection. Identifying such study candidates entailed taking painstaking medical histories and performing painful, medically risky spinal tap, ostensibly to determine the extent of syphilis neurological involvement. And when the PHS sent out notices to invite subjects for spinal taps, for the wording clearly indicated the participants were recruited under the guise of treatment. Some time ago, you were given a thorough examination, and since that time, we hope that you have gotten a great deal of treatment for bad blood. You will now be given your last chance to get a second examination. And this examination is a very special one. And after it is finished, you will be given a special treatment if it's believed that you are in a condition to stand it. Remember, this is your last chance for special free treatment. Be sure to meet the nurse. Yeah, sound like it's a treatment to me. When another throng appeared seeking the second treatment or second examination, the PHS ran the spinal taps and selected 399 men with syphilis as subjects to observe. And again, doctors dispensed inadequate medications such as aspirin, which was crawled as a miracle drug or craved as a miracle drug, but by the overworked, sickly men, who marveled at how it assuaged their omnipresent aches and pains. And Raymond von Delier, MD, Taliaferro Clark's successor, later added a control group of 200 uninfected men who also were wooed with medications. When a dozen of these men developed syphilis over the 40 years course of the experiment, they were simply transferred to the infected group, a blatant violation of experimental design. And perfect separation of infected and control groups was necessary for any accurate and truly objective comparison of their healthy states. By switching a man from the control group to the infected group, the physicians falsified data. And because they reported an event, in this case, a syphilis infection and the concomitant symptoms as transpiring in an infected member, while in fact it actually happened to be a control group member. This switching also artificially reduced the number of men in a relatively small control group who went on to contract syphilis. The comparison over the entire course of the disease, which was the ostensible purpose of the study, was made impossible when someone was switched from the active group to the control group after the disease had been progressing for some time before diagnosis. Now, von Dellenher confessed in a letter to Clark that it is my desire to keep the main purpose of the work from the Negroes in the country and to continue their interest in treatment. But there was no treatment. The next year, in 1933, the PHS doctors went on to write of bringing these cases to the autopsy. If any doubts lingered about the PHS physician's intentions to withhold treatment, O.C. Wenger, the PHS senior officer of its syphilis programs, swept these aside that year. As I see it, we have no further interest in these patients until they die. And like Joyce Heth, the aged Black woman who was displayed, then dissected for profit by P.T. Barnum, these men were regarded by an impatient PHS as living cadavers, more valuable to American medicine dead than alive. Wenger, who has been portrayed as the public health hero in Paul D. Cruz's 1938 book, The Fight for Life, eagerly awaited the men's death because autopsies would be necessary to confirm the diagnosis and the extent of injury caused by their untreated disease. These reports would be compared to those on the bodies of control subjects to characterize in terrible detail the ravages of syphilis. And however, the physicians anticipated difficulty in obtaining the men's bodies for autopsy, largely because, as was discussed in Chapter 5, African Americans bitterly resented the fact that their bodies were often stolen and exploited for anatomical examination. Wenger wrote von Van Halle, Vanderhill. Sound like a German name. There is one danger in the latter plan, and that it is if the colored population becomes aware that accepting free hospital care means a post-mortem, every darky will leave Macon County. The only way we are going to get post-mortems is to have a demise that takes the place of Diddles. In Diddles, Eugene Diddle, MD, the African American director of the Tuskegee Medical Center Hospital. And when these colored folk are told that Dr. Diddle is now a government doctor, too, they will have more confidence. The Surgeon General enlisted the Tuskegee Hospital to provide a site for spinal taps and autopsies, and he accordingly gave Diddle the PHS appointment. But because they feared losing track of the men before autopsy, the PHS doctors added inducements that maintained the treatment fiction, excuse me. Eugene Rivers, the eldest daughter of the Georgia farmer and one of the only 4 black public health nurses in the state of Alabama, was recruited from her dispiriting job as a night nurse at the John A. Andrew Hospital to serve as a scientific assistant, to assist in procedures and reanimations or examinations, not reanimations, examinations, and to keep track of the men. Rivers looked in on the men periodically and dispensed the medications, mostly aspirin, iron tonic, and vitamins that made them believe that they were in treatment. Rivers injected a bit of variety into their lives of drudgery and dispiriting poverty when she drove them into town to for their doctor's appointments in a shiny black car and distributed the occasional inducements of $1 or $2. She waited while they visited friends and marveled at the manicured university lawns and the painted shops on the city streets. She listened sympathetically to the litany of sickness, debts, and family woes and helped when she could. She interceded on their behalf when the doctors were especially brusque or derisive, and she was their friend. However, the men did not know that Rivers was also charged with tracking their movements and ultimately to ensure their presence at autopsy, which she did not mention to the men but would describe to their survivors as the operation to gain their assent. The PHS doctors still feared that the men would evade the hospital and die at home, cheating the researchers of the chance to autopsy them. So they offered free burials as the inducement. The Millbank Fund, an organization with strong eugenic leanings, agreed to pay the $50 fee, which was split by the funeral parlor and the physician who performed the autopsy. The men had the peace of mind of knowing that they would not end up unburied or in a potter's field. But this reassurance was illusory. Because the chief reasons they feared indigent burial was their fear of being autopsied first, and this was to be their precise medical fate. We're gonna see how it go, man. I'm only gonna read about an hour, a little under an hour. Read about 2 more pages. We'll see. About 2 more pages. One, two. 2.5. About 2.5 more pages, and I'll get to that. as stopping point. And I'll come back in a part 2 and finish off chapter 7. Let me mark the stopping point right now. Let's keep going. The syphilitic men were monitored so well that most received no treatment for 40 years. And despite the myriad dramatic changes in the medical landscape between 1932 and 1972, in 1934, PHS doctors met with local black doctors and asked them not to treat the men who were receiving care in the research study. The black doctors agreed, and in 1941, the PHS circulated a list of subjects' names to the draft board, instructing military physicians not to treat any men who were inducted. When the United States entered World War II, Tuskegee syphilis study subjects were exempted from the draft because of the PHS feared that they would be treated for syphilis in the military. And in the early 1940s, some study participants made their way to the PHS's fast-track VD treatment clinic, which were vociferously dedicated to the eradication of syphilis, but a list of their names had preceded them, and most were physically removed. Now, when penicillin proved an effective and safe cure for syphilis in 1943, a vigorous national program of treatment ensued, and some determined subjects did succeed in circumventing the government dragnet to obtain treatment. 30 men, 7.5% of the infected study participants, managed to obtain an effective degree of treatment, and prompting Vanderhiller to worry that the treatment might interfere with the study data. I hope that the availability of antibiotics has not interfered too much with this project. He wrote that scientist Stanley H. Schumann early in 1952. PHS doctors knew that this degree of treatment hopelessly polluted my data, and that they might salvage this from the study. Oh shit, man, I'm reading bad right now. So they later put a fictitious spin on the numbers of the participants who had received an adequate treatment, bolstered by the oft-repeated fiction of the, oh, shalom, my son. Shalom, how you feeling today, huh? Yeah. Oh, my son. I'm tired a little bit. Oh. Are you feeling anything hurt on you? My throat still hurts. Your throat hurts, okay. Well, they give you a little bit. We'll give you some more honey. Can you see? Yes, sir. Can you hear me? Yes, sir. You walk back here and you can talk good. Mm-hmm. Can you think? Yes, sir. Then you have everything you need to succeed today, son. You have everything you need to succeed, son. What you want to do? Get you something to eat? No, sir. I'm good. You good? All right. Well, go put your sweat on. So they later put a fictitious spin on the numbers of participants who had received adequate treatment, bolstered by the soft, repeated fiction that the blacks did not want or seek out medical care. And these men still regard hospitals and medicine with suspicion and prefer an occasional dose of time-honored herbs or tonics to modern drugs. I believe it, and I would too. As men began to die, the PHS performed autopsies and regularly published the results of medical journals or in medical journals. They even shared study results at the 1936 American Medical Association meeting, and which means many white physicians were informed of the study's details, but not African American physicians, who were largely barred from the AMA membership. The 1936 AMA report revealed that 84% of the infected subjects showed signs of illness. And a decade later, the death rate of the infected men was twice that of the control subjects, prompting Wenger to boast smugly in 1950, "We now know, where we could only surmise before, that we have contributed to their ailments and shortened their lives." And by 1955, nearly one-third of the autopsied men had died directly of syphilis. And many of our survivors were suffering its deadly complications. 40 wives were infected, and at least 19 children were born with syphilitic birth defects. In 1958, the PHS awarded a certification of appreciation signed by the Surgeon General to replete with a gold seal to each infected man, along with $25. I want that shit. $25. $1 for each year of study. You dusty foot. Oh, man. Oh. Take that, you sorry sucker. I want to shoot something. Oh, get back. Oh, $25? Dusty foot, man. Dusty foot. $1 for each year that I had to deal with this damn syphilis. Oh, man. Oh, man. Put one in the chamber on them boys. A magic bullet. That's what I'm going to send their way. A magic bullet. Take that. Broke my mirror. These things shoot hard, man. I'll bust a kid upside the head with one of these. A magic bullet withheld. Imagine the global jubilation that would greet the announcements of the simple injection to cure AIDS. This kind of exuberance accompanied the discovery of penicillin, a magic bullet with which scientists believed they would finally tame syphilis, a plague with which medicine had wrestled for centuries. And in 1943, the PHS networks of clinics triumphantly dispensed penicillin nationally, to the deep satisfaction of Surgeon General Thomas Perron, who had adopted syphilis eradication as a personal and professional crusade. And in his 1937 book, Shadow on the Land, Perron had bemoaned the high rates of syphilis in blacks and poor populations, and now he could lay claim to having orchestrated its demise. But even Perron, which presented with this antibiotic holy grail, opted for continued experimentation with the black men of Macon County. He explained that the availability of penicillin meant the opportunity represented by the Tuskegee syphilis studies pool of syphilitic patients would never come again and must be exploited. And 33 years after the study began, social changes eclipsed the moral question posed by penicillin, a question that the PHS had dismissed so blithely. The nation that had passively accepted medical apartheid and sharecropper slavery in 1932 was racked by constant ethnic tension and racial warfare by the 1960s. Deadly racial repression with dogs, guns, lynchings, and bombings reigned in the defiant South and the North. Murderous street brawls erupted over voting rights, school desegregation, de facto segregation, and conflicts with police. National group troops enforced integration as urban riots consumed northern and southern cities alike in blood and fire. But these events were tangential. But these events were tangential to the shady, tightly circumscribed lives of the wary, destitute sharecroppers in the rural study, which median age was now 74. And they were enfeebled beyond their years by poverty, prostrating labor, and syphilis. And the PHS physicians were deeply concerned because 3 men had already been lost to autopsy when they died without the researchers learning of it and in time to obtain the bodies. And in order to assure the needed autopsies, it was essential for the PHS to track closely the aged men's serious illnesses and hospitalizations, in any of which could end in death. I wonder if that's how they got all this tracking system down now when you go to the hospitals now. You gotta, they just keep all your records and shit. In order to assure that needed autopsies, it was essential for the PHS to track closely the aged men's serious illnesses and the hospitalizations, any one of which could end in death. And however, Eunice Rivers was aging too and becoming too old to track them, and she was given the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare's highest honor, the Oveta Gope Hobby Award, for 25 years, during which, through selfless devotion and skillful human relations, she has sustained the interest and cooperation of the subjects of the Venereal Disease Control Program in Macon County, Alabama, and then retired. The black nurse who replaced her was told to be sure to visit any seriously ill or hospitalized men frequently. And suddenly, in 1965, the nation's civil rights drama played out in medical sphere as the PHS found its ethics assailed from many directions. The radical leftist group students from the Democratic Society, the SDS, discovered the Tuskegee syphilis study and held rallies urging that it be ended, but they were easily dismissed as the fringe group given to counterculture hyperbole. However, the question of racism in the study also resurfaced within the medical fold, and as Alan Brandt discovered when he found the minutes of a 1965 meeting at the Center of Disease Control, the CDC, the excerpt is illuminating. Racial issue was mentioned briefly, will not affect the study. Any questions can be handled by saying that these people were at the point that therapy would no longer help them. They are getting better medical care than they would under any other circumstances. And the same year, a white physician, Dr. Irwin J. Schwartz of the Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, wrote the PHS after reading a medical paper on the Tuskegee syphilis study in the archives of internal medicine. His letter began, "I am utterly astounded by the fact that physicians allow patients with potentially fatal disease to remain untreated when effective therapy is available." His letter was never answered. By the year's end, the study was dealt with what would eventually prove a fatal blow by Peter Buxton, a young Polish immigrant who worked as the venereal disease interviewer for the PHS. He learned of the study and immediately risked his job by writing his superiors to ask that it be stopped. And a handful of PHS physicians responded by holding meetings at which they lectured Buxton on the scientific merits of their works and decided to continue the study. And in 1967, Buxton left the agency to attend law school, but he occasionally wrote the PHS to renew his complaints and to no avail. By 1969, physical examinations and autopsies revealed that as many as 100 of the men had died of syphilis and its complications, and others had died of heart disease that researchers ascribed to syphilis. And in 1972, Buxton, exasperated by 7 years of PHS inaction, told a journalist friend about the study. And on July 25th of that year, Jean Heller broke the story for the Associated Press. Shocked, PHS officials denied any knowledge of the human rights abuses. However, they also deftly defended their work by explaining how the syphilis treatment available in 1933, asphenamide, would have been worthless and possibly too dangerous to give the men. They added that treating the men now would risk their health. None of these claims was true, and asphenamide had been the standard of care when the study began, and treating the men now would imperil only the study's data. Now, the news media, physicians, politicians, and ordinary citizenry, black and white, expressed horrified anger and demanded an explanation from the government and some sort of assurance that such cruelty would never again be sanctioned by the PHS. The government promised to conduct an internal review, but when it became evident that this would neither mollify the press nor appease public outrage, Senator Ted Kennedy held hearings, and the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, the HEW official, Assistant Secretary of Health and Scientific Affairs Merlin K. Duval, MD, announced an investigation on August 24th, 1972. Duval appointed a 9-member panel of esteemed professionals whose dissection of the study quickly degenerated into inefficiency, shouting matches, political infighting, accusations of a government cover-up, and the appealing destruction of key evidence, a grimly self-destructive brawl that has never before been made public. And we're at the stopping point. We'll come back and start the next session, the cover-up, the ad hoc panel. Oh, man. My eyes is getting wonky at the last little page or two. Last page or two. But hey, so far, man, there's a lot of stuff about that Tuskegee experiment in there. You know, willful participants at first, but under the guise of we're gonna give you help. Man, how many times have you heard that? And then years later they come back. Have you taken triphenamine? If you have taken triphenamine, then you might be for have available for a lawsuit. If you have these symptoms, 90% of people who have taken triphenamine, acetylene. Anyway, so we worked our body to start off. We worked our mind with reading as we rode through the sea of pages through the medical apartheid. And we're going to go ahead and work our body one last time before we head out and continue on with the day. So get off your lazy ass and do 25 things. 25 things that's going to, you know, shit. You're going to push yourself to do something. Something. Get off your ass. Do something. 25 things. I'm going to just do 25 things. it's not heavy enough. I think I need to go to work that 50, I guess. Oh, yeah, let's go this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 11 of them. 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Oh, shit. 23, 24, 25. There we go. Well, man, I was not energetic for them 25 things. I was not very energetic. Oh, my energy sucked. Anyway, but my head buster, baby, right there. Head buster. Hey, I did something. I hope you did something. Let's keep moving. Let's keep trying to better ourselves. Let's keep trying to build up better habits. Consistent habits. Consistency is the key. Let's keep pushing. A little bit at a time. A little bit at a time. A little bit at a time, one day at a time. And that was the beginning of chapter 7 of the Medical Apartheid by Miss Harriet A. Washington. We're going to keep pushing. I'm almost halfway through the book. We got a little bit to go. We're moving along good, though. Shit, I've been doing about a chapter a day. About a chapter a day since we started. About a chapter a day. But, hey, I like it. I can dig it. Hope you can, too. Hey, like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate everybody who stopped by for today's episode of Reading with SHILO. I'm SHILO, man. I'm out here, and I'm going to be out here. So we're going to keep pushing, man. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. Catch it on the back end. Come catch the next episode as we finish off chapter 7. The notoriously syphilis-soaked race. We'll finish off chapter 7 later. Shalom, everybody. I hope y'all have a wonderful, wonderful day. I'm out here. I'm out. SHILO.